Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 10:32, so we'll go ahead and get underway. John's going to lead us in the invocation, and then Michael, the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join if you wish.
Would you please bow with me? Father God, we just want to thank you for the gift of today. Thank you for this gift. Thank you for the air that we breathe and the lungs that we have to breathe in. Thank you for the blessings that you have poured down upon this county, Lord. And thank you for all the people that work in and live and play and work in the county. We ask now that you give us the wisdom, your wisdom, so that we can guide this county as you would have us guided according to your plan. In Jesus' precious name, amen.
Amen.
Michael?
Yes, please repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lip syncing. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Now.
Present via Zoom from the city of St. Joseph.
Curran. Freely.
Present via Zoom, Rhoda Township.
Harrison.
Present via Zoom from Lincoln Township.
Hinkleman.
Present. Waterley.
Majerick.
Present via Zoom, City of Niles.
Meeks.
Present via Zoom, Ben Charter Township.
Scott.
Present via Zoom, New Buffalo Township.
Ballrat.
Present, Coloma Township, zooming in, and I see Curran's here now too.
Werfel.
Present via Zoom, Royalton Township.
Yarborough.
Present via Zoom, City of Benton Harbor.
Elliott.
Present in the boardroom, please do a recall on Commissioner Curran.
Curran.
I am present via Zoom, Niles Township.
Mr. Chair, you have 12 present.
Thank you. We have minutes from last week. Haven't heard about any changes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as submitted by the clerk?
So moved, Commissioner Scott.
Is there support?
Support Michael Majerick.
Moved by Scott, supported by Majerick. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Curran.
Yes.
Freely.
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
Hinkleman.
Yes.
Majerick.
Yes.
Meeks.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Ballrat.
Affirmative.
Werfel.
Yes.
Yarborough.
Yes.
Bell.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 12 yeas.
Thank you. And Madam Clerk, have we any communication?
Yes, you received 3 resolutions, one from the nominee County Board of Commissioners, a resolution requesting that the state of Michigan fulfills its statutory obligations with regard to state revenue sharing payments received on May 13th. Dickinson County Board of Commissioners, a resolution in support of the state of Michigan to fulfill its statutory obligations with regards to state revenue sharing payment amounts received on May 13th. Muskegon County Board of Commissioners, a resolution regarding vaccine passports within the boundaries of Muskegon County received on May 18th. That's all.
Thank you. Are we ready to move into Warren's presentation? Okay. Yeah. We'll get the millage rates equalization presentation now, and I think we're going to do screen sharing.
Good morning, Green County Board of Commissioners. It's that time of year where you typically would approve the millage rates for levy. This year is a little bit different from past years. I want to say since 2008, the same operating millage has been collected, but this year is a little bit different. So I put together a brief presentation explaining the situation and why. presented it last week to the Finance Committee, and I'm gonna run through it now with you in just a moment. All right, so just for comparison, the previous year, last year's millage rates look something like this. Again, that operating levy of 4.7723 has been the same for, I want to say, 13 years. The rates that I am bringing before you today are slightly less. There's been a small reduction in the rates, and this is what those look like. The reason being is because they have been reduced by a Headley rollback of 0.9991, and this is what that looks like. The prior year rate times that reduction fraction equals the 2021 rate. So then the obvious question, why? I'm going to read this verbatim. This is from the State Tax Commission. State that the Headley millage reduction fraction intends that ignoring additions and losses, any current operating millage must be reduced if it would produce more tax dollars adjusted for inflation than it did last year. While this calculation may result in a millage reduction fraction that is less than 1, it cannot exceed 1. What that last bit means is that there's no such thing as roll forwards or roll ups. Millages can only roll back. But what does the rest of that mean? Here's how I like to think about it. If taxable value increases too much from certain sources, then millage rates must be reduced so that the increase doesn't produce more tax dollars than the prior year. Now that's definitely an oversimplification. That's not exactly right, but that's a good way to just take a step back and kind of look at the big picture of what's happening. So if taxable value goes up from too much from certain sources, let's take a look at how taxable value can increase. There are multiple ways. This isn't an all-inclusive list, but you've got your inflation, your new property construction, transfers of ownership, exempt property becoming taxable, and so on. If anyone wants to take a guess at what our culprit is, or if you've read ahead, you may have found that transfers of ownership are the main contributor to Headley rollbacks. The reason for that being, things like new property construction and annexed and omitted property, they come on the roll as as Headley additions. So this is what that looks like in the mathematical calculation. We start with the prior year taxable value. We subtract losses, which are things like demolished property, property coming off the roll. And that gets multiplied by your inflation rate multiplier. So that's why inflation, as stated on the previous slide, isn't a contributor to the rollbacks. We're allowed that inflationary increase because that's taken care of in the formula. So that's our top part of the division. Then we take the 2021 taxable value and we subtract from it the additions. The additions, again, are things like new property construction, annexed property, and so on. So those get subtracted from the formula, and that's why transfers of ownership, when property is uncapped, are the biggest contributor to Headley rollbacks. So when you look at the math, we've got our numerator and our denominator, one divided by the other, and that's how we've ended up with this 0.9991 Headley reduction. So what does that actually mean? Well, in past years, we've levied the full 4.7723, and that was what was planned to levy all along. So the reduced amount is slightly less. So good news for Berrien County taxpayers. There's slightly less millage levied than what was planned and put forward. The reduction being 0.0043 mils, which represents against the county's total taxable value, approximately $37,000. Now this is where it gets interesting. When we were trying to forecast the 2021 budget and get our crystal ball, I raised the question, what if it becomes necessary to roll back the millage? And so I submitted hypothetically, if the county has to reduce its millage, there might be a rollback something along the lines of 0.9980. So that actually ended up being used in the budget projections. The actual levy the actual rollback is a higher number. So it's actually a pretty remarkable situation where the amount that was used to project the budget ended up being a higher or a more intense reduction than the actual reduction. So at the end of the day, this is good news. This is saying that we were completely prepared for the reduction. It was taken into account, which is, again, very remarkable because there's really no way to predict this. It's just what happens, and it was pure circumstance and coincidence that we managed to have that buffer in place. So it's good news all around. And in summary, what does this mean for Berrien County? Well, a Headley rollback cannot be prevented. It's just we're at the mercy of the math and the variables. There is less millage being collected than what was planned, but more than was used for the budget projections. The result is still more revenue than was seen last year because of such a significant taxable value increase from other sources. And reductions are permanent, meaning next year the baseline will be this new reduced amount for the purposes of determining the new levy for 2022. That's my presentation, and I'm certainly happy to address any questions that you may have.
Brian, did you have anything to add?
Well, number one, as we went through the budget process, Warren and his team did a really impressive job of accurately estimating what our numbers were going to look like. Now, last week at Finance, he was very humble, just talking about it was a really good guess, but I think it was more than that, so well done. Generally, to the board, to the public, this is not, I view this as a good thing, not a bad thing. The rollback indicates that, number one, that as a community, values continue to go up. It appears that there's quite a bit of turnover of property. If this is viewed as a headache, it is a good type of headache. So as we look to the future, people are going to be taxed less and we will have more revenue to work with. So not a bad situation to be in. Those are my comments, sir.
Anyone on the board floor, figuratively speaking, have any questions?
No, you weren't. I just muted you after you asked that question, so we can hear them as they ask a question. Sorry.
Sorry.
You're gonna go easy on me today.
Any questions, anyone? Okay. Warren, can you explain, some folks may not have dealt with it, the interplay between Headley and truth and taxation as we get into the budget process?
Yeah, absolutely. As I was explaining regarding the Headley reduction, which is what we're discussing today, that states that, pulling up my slide here for reference, just one moment, that ignoring additions and losses, any current operating millage must be reduced if it would produce more tax dollars adjusted for inflation than it did last year. Truth and taxation is a whole nother type of rollback situation. There's actually potentially 4 different rollbacks that need to be dealt with in a given year, depending on whether or not you're a municipality or a school district and so forth. But the truth and taxation reduction behaves very much like the Headley reduction, but it doesn't have that inflationary increase built into the formula. And so I'll show you what that looks like here real quick. So again, referencing the Headley formula, it gets multiplied by the annual inflation rate multiplier, in this case 1.014. In calculating a truth and taxation reduction, that's not part of the formula. So at the end of the day, it says that you cannot levy an amount in excess of the base tax rate unless you comply with truth in taxation. Well, the base tax rate is your total prior year operating levy times the base tax rate fraction, which is something I calculate every year. And it's almost always the case that the maximum allowable millage under Headley is higher than the base tax rate. So I realize I'm throwing a lot of words out there, but at the end of the day, what it means is we have to comply with truth in taxation pretty much every year. Our methods for doing that are A, holding a special hearing, or B, the much shorter and direct method of conforming with Section 16 of the Uniform Accounting and Budgeting Act, which is part of the appropriations process that we handle in November. So what that does is in November we said, okay, these are the millage rates that we're planning to levy for 2021 and for the purpose in which they are going to be levied. And by doing that, we've complied with this Section 16, which enables us to levy an amount in excess of the base tax rate. So we don't have that other millage reduction to deal with. So that's kind of all happening behind the scenes, but as Chairperson Elliott brought to the attention, this is a separate, distinct type of rollback that also must be dealt with, besides the Headley reduction.
Very good, thank you. If no one has anything more for Warren, we will move on. We have a presentation about board appointment process. Thank you, Warren. You can hang out if you wish. If you have other things you want to do, we won't be offended.
I will leave you to it.
Okay. Now that's a tough call. All right, Annette.
Sure. So once upon a time, the appointments that were done to the various boards and committees that the Board of Commissioners appointed to, that was actually done by resolutions. In 1993, a policy was adopted and an application form was approved. That was all prior to my working here. In 2005, some of the commissioners asked that process be reevaluated, and so it was tweaked. And the purpose for that was that a lot of it was more of a who knows who kind of thing, reach out to people to kind of get volunteers to be on some of these boards. And this, the evaluation that was done in 2005 was the intent was to open that up so that more public were involved. What was found between 2005 and 2011 was that a lot of the members, the volunteers that serve on these boards had been there for a long time. They had a lot of experience with the board. They knew how it operated. They were actively involved. Their attendance was very good. And we found that even though we were publishing vacancies on boards, even really they weren't really a vacancy, it was just that an appointment was up, a lot of the individuals were still being reappointed. And so in 2011, it was reevaluated again, and that process now includes an option for an internal, if you will, reaching out to the person who sits on a board and allowing them the opportunity to apply to be reappointed. And that is done prior to it being put out there to the public because it is not considered a vacancy. The policy or procedure actually explains that. That an individual who's appointed to a board would stay on that until a replacement is picked or they are reappointed. And so if a person, or before that would go anywhere, it still is touched by the board. It's touched by the parent committee to the individual board or committee. We go to them first, and then it's up to that parent committee to decide whether they would like to provide a recommendation to the full board for reappointment or to open that up and accept applications. Then the third part of that is, of course, if there is a vacancy created by virtue of a person not wanting to be reappointed or the board's direction was to not reappoint, then we accept applications, and then we go back to the parent committee with those applications. And again, the parent committee has the option of whether they would like to recommend someone to the full board for an appointment, or if they would like for the applicants to be interviewed. If the parent committee chooses to move the process forward so that there are interviews that occur, then the chairperson of the board selects an interview committee, usually or can include one board member from every committee. It sometimes can include the people who actually sit on the board that the applications being considered for. And so that interview committee is then the person that, or the body that brings that reappointment or recommendation to the full board. There are certain boards that have special situations or circumstances because of statute or because of bylaws or other things that might direct the reappointment and or appointment that's going to happen to their board. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background on that process as to where we are now and kind of how we got there. And I think that should do it.
All right, thanks. Questions, comments about that?
Mac, Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Annette, when these boards, let's say somebody is coming up and their appointment is waning, it's going to be done soon. Do any of these boards then recommend that person to be reappointed?
Yes, your policy does allow for outside information to be provided to assist either the parent committee and or an interview committee if it gets to that point. Certainly the body or maybe the staff people that work with those boards can provide that, and it is given to the whichever committee it is that's reviewing that appointment.
Thank you. I kind of figured that. I just, as a matter of fact, I knew that, but I wanted everybody to know that also, that when a board recommends the reappointment of a particular board member who was appointed by the county, then that also goes to that parent committee and does carry weight.
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner.
Go ahead, Julie.
Sorry about that. I have been questioning some of this process, and I thank you, Annette, for bringing that background to us and sharing that with us so that there's a more complete understanding of that. One thing I would add is that what I have not seen is some of the process that Annette went through as a part of the admin committee. We've done maybe only about 3 or 4 appointments this year. And it was never brought to us to say, do we want to go out to the public? And maybe that only goes to the chair. I don't know that. But for that recommendation, it was like, here's the reappointment, just to appoint them. And there was no other additional ability for a citizen to apply if there's a need. I think it's important that we really make sure that we're staying inclusive to all of our citizens and the ability for our citizens to participate in these committees and boards and in the entire governing process. I think if we're just rubber stamping always reappointments, I think that's a dangerous precedent that we're setting. And I think we just need to be aware of that. And if anything, maybe there is a term limit that needs to be added to the policy. And I would guess that would go through the PHS committee because that's not currently in there for review or for consideration. So those are my comments on it, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. We'll move to the admin committee board appointments. Jim?
Yes, thank you, Mac. Last meeting, we were unable to make the appointment because we were waiting on the circuit court judges, and they have confirmed our reappointment of Virginia Antonson to the jury board. So I would like to make that motion.
Is there support for that motion?
I'll second.
I moved and supported. Any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Freeling,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Hinkleman,
Yes.
Najeri,
Yes.
Deeks,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Borak,
Yes.
Werfel,
Yes.
Yarborough, Commissioner Yarborough,
She stepped away. She's not there, sorry.
Bell,
Yes.
Curran,
Yes.
Yarborough,
Yes. What? Yes, what?
You're voting on the appointment of Virginia Hampton's reappointment to the jury board, maybe?
Yes. Thank you.
Elliott.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, you have 12 yeas.
thank you. Moving on to, committee reports. We'll start with PHS. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We met this morning and took a number of actions. First, on your agenda today are the per diems for county commissioners. Those total $5,750.96. So we reviewed those and they were approved. We also, the Bering County Health Department has been awarded $46,000. This is for COVID efforts to track down and encourage different communities to get the vaccine. If you remember back, we approved a resolution several months ago for the health department to apply for this grant, and they did receive it. So that's on your agenda later on today. We also, as our job is to review pension rollovers, and so we did review those. There were 13, and these are individuals who have separated from employment at Bering County and then are moving their money. They're not any of the employer contributions. They're moving their money to a different retirement plan or system. And so those were reviewed and approved. We also had 14 retirements that we reviewed and approved those also. The health department came to us looking for an advanced step authorization. This is for an individual to do vision and hearing checks for their health department. This is a replacement position. They have a number of people that do this currently. And so we did review that and approve that. And then the last thing that we did was review and approve our minutes. So we had a good meeting and a good discussion, and those were the actions taken by us today. I'd be glad to answer any questions about them.
Questions for PHS? All right, then we'll move to finance. Madam Chair.
Good morning and thank you. I would like to say that our meeting started out with a request for 3 waivers. And I'd ask Commissioner Scott if he would report on those, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The waiver reports or the waiver requests that came in from the IS department for an existing agreement and also for another single source, which happened to be cameras from the juvenile center. The reason that we approved both of these is that the agreement was just that. It was an agreement for computer programming equipment that we already have. And we felt that that was the best way to go ahead with that rather than to send it out for bid because we were very happy. There were bids that were sought, and the people that we decided to go with that had the existing agreement were the lowest bidder anyway. So we discussed that. The Sheriff's Department also came to us and it was for the crash data, and it was a licensing agreement with an upgrade to their software for the crash data, and we approved that. The Sheriff's Department also came to us with a little bit of a different thing on a waiver, and we discussed how the waiver affected this. And we might even have a little bit of a change to the waiver. We're not sure yet, but we may, due to this particular issue that came up. And this has to do with the Berrien County Foundation. It seems there was a personal donation of approximately $4,800 from the family of the recent drowning victim that was just happened here lately down by the channel where they're by the rocks, by the break wall. And this was for a sonar camera that would help in the detection, looking for a lost drowning victim. And they donated the money for this particular piece of equipment, but it had to go through the Berrien County Foundation. So there's really no county funds coming out of there, but we have to approve it. So there was the difference. How do we approve a waiver for something when it's not coming out of county funds? But it has to go through the county in order for it to be processed. So we've worked that out. I believe that's it, Madam Chair. I don't think we talked. Oh, no, we did. We talked about one other thing.
I want to talk about that.
Right. There was an issue with the holsters. Is that what you were wondering?
Yes, I will explain that.
All right. You explain that, Madam Chair, then I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What I would like to let you know, the next thing, last week we had a bid opening, and it was one of them, and Chuck Height, Under Sheriff Chuck Height came back to us. It says that, you know, if it's not, the price is not right, or if it does not fit your request, you can come back to our committee. And so Under Sheriff Height came back because the holsters that bid, when we took the lowest bid, it was not in this company's region, and they should not have bidded on it. I don't know if they didn't know, and we certainly didn't know. The company was from Oregon, and it was brought to our attention that they're not able to do business with us. And so what Under Sheriff Height was requesting is that we go with the second lowest bid. And how it came out is it's the same company that we bought the guns from. So the holsters have been ordered, and we know now not to, when we send out requests for bids, not to send it to that company, and that company also knows that we're not in their area. So we agreed or made a motion for that to happen, and it will be able to get it. Then the next person that came in was our finance director, Doug James. And he gave us a very good report, a very thorough report, a very positive report. All the things that Berrien County is doing is, you know, like up, we're not minus anything. And so what he told us, he gave us a report on the year end, our year end situation, 2020. And he says it's not finished yet until the ink dries. There's still things coming in, but our fund balance is at a 42%. The desire is that you be at a 40%, but he knows and believes it will still continue to go up. So we have money to the good. Then another thing he did, he gave us our balance through March 31st of 2021. And then we have a contingency where we keep about $2 million in a fund. So if something comes up, we're able to do it without waiting for the next month or the next week or whatever. And one of the things we bought with out of that was a forklift truck, and, you know, just a number of things we've done. And it's still at a real good balance of like probably 1 million something. I don't see my number right now, but the contingency is in good shape. And because it was such a thorough report, Administrator Doucette asked Doug James to make copies of the sheets and send them to all the commissioners. So you'll have that, and at some point, should you desire, you'll be able to ask questions of our administrator or of Doug James. We accepted the minutes, we agreed to pay bills, and we sent you all resolutions for your approval today. I'd like to know if there are any other things I left out. Do you have any questions of the Finance Committee?
Any questions?
That is my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamie. queued up for our consent calendar. We're going to add a couple resolutions, but before we get to that, we'll check for public comments regarding resolutions, and that will include the two that we're adding. And the two that we're going to be adding are the 800 megahertz with Chickamauga Township, and then the Michigan Health Endowment Fund resolution for COVID-19 funding. So let's pause for a moment and see if anybody has anything to say.
Hey, Sheriff, this is Commissioner Scott. Are you having lunch today with Sheriff Benke?
No, that's been changed.
I saw him the other week. I had to ask you. I was giving him a hard time. I said, I'll tell the sheriff. Yep.
We changed it to next Thursday.
Ah, okay.
We haven't received any public comments. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar, including the added resolutions ending in 5211 and 5233?
This is Commissioner Curran. I'll make that motion.
This is Walrath, I'll second.
Moved by Curran, supported by Volrath. Any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Harrison.
Yes.
Engelmann.
Yes.
Majerick.
Yes.
Meeks.
Yes.
Scott.
Yes.
Walrath.
Affirmative.
Werfel.
Yes.
Yarborough.
Yes.
Bell.
Yes.
Curran.
Yes.
Grayling.
Yes.
Elliott.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, you have 12 yeas.
thank you. Commissioner reports. Anyone have anything to share?
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Werfel.
Yes, please go
I
ahead.
had the Community Action Board meeting last night, and May is the Community Action Month. And so I want to highlight for you our weatherization progress. We have helped with 39 homes this year, bringing the electric up to code, repairing water heaters, or removing vermiculite in those homes. So making them therefore obviously healthier. So good progress going on at the Southwest Michigan Community Action Board. And that staff is phenomenal. I will add DHHS. There was somebody on the call last night, and they are working on a full opening back to the public in July. So there's also progress being made on that front as well. That's my report.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Administrator, anything to report?
Yeah, so members of the board, I want to thank the board for the approval of the purchase installment agreement with Chickamauga Township. Just a little bit of background to the board and the public. This is related to 800 megahertz radio purchases for the fire department. The hope from staff, and I believe from the 911 Advisory Committee, is that this agreement that will be bringing back similar agreements for some of the fire departments spread across Marion County. The county board via prior resolution took action to notify the public of the intent to switch all communication to 800 megahertz, moving away from the VHF system. That's something that's been in the works for nearly 2 decades. That deadline hits at the end of 2021. So in addition to providing technical assistance, going out for state federal grants, and then even going to the local community foundations to try and help with local grants, we have also now offered up financing for any of the townships that are struggling with the conversion to 800 megahertz radios. I know that several of the commissioners have been in touch with their townships and their local fire departments, but I would encourage all of you, if you're hearing from your fire officials that they're struggling with this, let us know. Today's installment and purchase agreement is something that we can easily reproduce and provide that assistance out to other fire departments. That's item one. Item two is just a repeat of what Commissioner Warfel just indicated. We are closely monitoring the situation with MDHHS. As soon as we have rules in place, last Friday's announcement was a little bit of a surprise that masks were no longer mandated. So for the county buildings, we're still operating under the prior MDHHS rules. As soon as we have the updated rules, we will then pivot. We'll bring back our COVID plan to the board for revisions, and we will follow what the state is recommending. But until we actually have those rules in hand, we're going to continue as we have been doing for quite a while, which is requiring masks in our buildings. I know that's not something that makes everyone happy, but until we have the new rules, we're going to operate off the old rules. And then lastly, just one more reminder about Dr. J wrapping up his service to the county through his work at the health department. They did have a retirement open house, I think on Monday, and Annette had done a nice job of taking the resolution that this board adopted, thanking him and honoring him for his decades of service. I took that from Annette, she had it in a nice folder, and I delivered it over to Dr. J and just I thanked him for all of his good work. Those are my comments, sir.
Thank you. Questions for the administrator? Hearing none, we'll move to general public comments.
Tony Benhart from Sodas Township. As to the board appointments and keeping the appointments fair, I feel there should be a term limit, as to say 2 terms or 4 years, and not having more than 1 from the same district. I feel that this keeps the openings fair to all citizens, but with the special qualifications considered. For general info, there is a new fiber cable being strung along Town Line Road in Meadowbrook. Adolph Peltzer of Hager Township is just asking a question about what the board see with regard to the YouTube. So the board sees the YouTube chat boxes on our YouTube presentation of this meeting, which is where we are streaming it live so the public can participate in our meetings. So they don't actually see that, but that meeting is kept on YouTube for an extended period of time. So, and there are no other general public comments.
Okay, well, thank you to Mr. Benhart and Peltzer for their comments. Other business.
Mac, this is Commissioner Scott. I have a kind of a question. I don't want it to be the elephant in the room, but I would sure like to get back to in-person meetings again. I think we need to get back into the in-person meetings, especially our 8:30 committee of the whole meeting, where we have the different department heads coming before us to let us know. If we're going to be looking at the COVID plan based on the new recommendations coming out of the state, once we get those, I would ask that we at least see what we can do about that, and or a hybrid model as to not incur any damage to the public so that they can attend the meetings either in person or in another room or through Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, could you just recap what you told us about MDHHS?
Sure. So we're closely watching the situation with the state of Michigan. On Friday, Governor Whitmer announced a change to the mask requirements. MDHHS staff has indicated, as Commissioner Werfel noted at her meeting, the staff at MDHHS has noted that new rules are coming. Just speaking frankly, we anticipated those rules to be in place by Wednesday of this week. That didn't happen. MIOSHA has indicated that their position is that they're comfortable with the looser enforcement. However, until the rules are formally changed by MDHHS, my advice is we continue to be in a holding pattern for the return to in-person meetings. The admin committee met last week. They started that conversation. That was on Thursday. On Friday, we got the surprise that mask requirements were no longer something that the state was going to push. So we're still very much in a gray area. As soon as we have those updated rules from MDHHS, we can then engage admin about the plan to get back to in-person, and then we can work with staff to get the COVID response plan updated and before the Board of Commissioners for revision.
All right, thank you. We do have one other public comment that's filtered through.
And this is in addition to Mr. Peltzer's comments. If the board is looking for room to expand or buildings, may I suggest that you look at the schools that are empty and uncovered?
All right, thank you. Announcements, reminders. I don't see anything on my copy of the agenda concerning committee meetings, but that could of course change. As it stands right now, we'll get back together here Thursday next at 10:30. If there's nothing else, we stand adjourned.
All right, do you want to take 10 minutes and then